ladies, another day, another podcast. Today I have a special guest for you. Her name is Mandy Barbee. She is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, distinguished graduate of USAF Academy, and founder of Palladium Mind Incorporated, where she utilizes imagery and visualization techniques with modern people to help them rapidly eliminate anxiety and enjoy everything more. She serves clients from more than 25 countries, both visually and in person, in her office in Seattle, Washington. Mandy arrived at her emotionally open worldview through unique experiences. She's a former USAF officer and an MA in economics. From leading F-22 flight line operations as an FA officer to managing financial performance in 3 commercial industries to leading rock and ice climbs all over North America, Mandy is obsessed with creating massive, lasting, and positive changes with others using practical action and fun and natural tools. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. Too often people look at others and say, how did you do it? How did you do it? How do you create this? How do you create balance? How do you have it all? Yeah, all those questions that we ask. How do you create ease and flow in your parenting? How do you not freak out about financial situations? This, if anyone wants to know my secret, this is my secret. Energy work. I cannot tell you enough how it has drastically shifted my emotional well-being. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Mandy. We just get to the tip of the iceberg. We'll talk about her contact information at the end. It will also be in her in the show notes. So check that out and just know that you are not alone. You are not alone. There is a way to be in the world, but you have to ask yourself, am I trying things outside of the box, or do I keep doing the same thing and beat myself up and just beat against the wall? Is that what I'm trying to say? It's like, okay, let me reframe that. We live our lives. We do the same thing over and over and over again. But in order to receive different results in our life, we have to do things differently. So I'm hoping that today's conversation allows you to crack open a little bit and to think about your situation differently. So let's dive in. Okay, so I said I needed to hit record on this conversation because I think it's really important. And when we do interviews, we always want to get formal, but let's talk. I really want to know about rock climbing. I've been craving adventure, and I was telling you that a friend of mine this year, we were chatting, and we're like, we want something that's going to bring us to our knees. And Mandy, this will go into the conversation about the unconscious, but I think there's so much magic that happens through the physical body that we don't give ourselves enough emphasis on. We become busy, overworked adults, and we forget about the importance of fun and adventure and movement and all of those things to help us become our best self. So what were you saying about rock climbing?
Well, as you're saying that now, I have a rock climbing background. I threw myself into it obsessively about 8 years ago, Heather. And thank you so much for spending this time with me today. It's so great to see you face to face, because a lot of times when we talk, it's just over the phone. But what you said about the importance of the physical body, and that you are craving something that's going to bring you to your knees. I think that's so interesting, because we experience a lot of stress and anxiety in our daily lives, but we know that that's not. We know in our conscious, we know in our intellect, we know in our being that none of that stuff is really worth stressing about. And that's what can make it so frustrating. So when we as modern people, as civilized people living in the cultured of urban areas, I think a lot of us crave and may not necessarily even be able to call it out, as well as you did, like we need something to shake things up a little bit, because I think when you do something like rock climbing, it does kind of put everything in perspective. Mm-hmm. And it's really powerful in that it is a physical feat as well, because you're doing something to occupy so many parts of yourself at once. That one of the beautiful things about rock climbing is that it can simultaneously shut down the chatter and put you, it's like a way of getting right into that flow state.
So what was your obsession of diving in 8 years ago? Why did you do that? How'd you find it?
Yeah, I think the most transparent way to answer that question.
Let's just be honest.
Let's just be really honest here. Through my mid-20s, I was an Air Force officer, and I was also a mega people pleaser. And those two things, that environment of extreme structure and demand, it appealed to me for a lot of reasons. It was like the ultimate challenge to test my ability to conquer. And choosing your tool as people pleasing is a really tough one. It's going to put you in a vice grip. There's pressure there because there's a system, and then there's you, there's your soul and all this. And I saw that my coping mechanisms weren't super effective. I did some really, really amazing work with some really amazing people. But at the end of it all, when I did leave the military at the age of 27, I left it behind happily, like bid farewell, had a lot of lovely friends I still keep in touch with to this day. I was really craving that solitude, like that Emersonian life of wilderness. And so I didn't know that it would be rock climbing that like pulled me in. But I was looking for a job out in the mountain area of the US. And I was really trying to live in Montana, but I ended up in Portland. And rock climbing kind of found me that first weekend of Portland.
Is that where you are now?
I was in Portland for about 2 years, and now I'm in Seattle. I live on Mercer Island. That's where I'm speaking to you from today, my little house, my little apartment in Mercer Island. Okay. And I work in a high rise with a giant window view of Mount Rainier right in my office in downtown Seattle.
Nice. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So when you found it, what did you find during that process?
I think it started out as much of the same, like a way to prove myself to myself for sure. It's it's one of the most solitary sports that you need other people to do. Mm-hmm. You spend most of your time in the mountains in the quiet of your own head, walking many, many miles, many, many hours to get to some of these places. But then there's that beautiful symbiosis of having another person's presence there. And definitely, I think any endeavor that we undertake is kind of like a way to just buff off. I was speaking with a client about this yesterday. I think rock climbing kind of helped me buff away and reveal some of the ways that I was still seeking that external validation. Mm-hmm. And that's a process that will continue, surely. Some of us are moving constantly from one end of the spectrum towards connection. And some of us are moving from seeking validation, I think, towards freedom from that. That's kind of the way that I see things. A lot of the people that I think you and I serve, because of my background, they're on that spectrum of maybe needing too much external validation. And so we're coming this way because this isn't a universal, but I think a lot of times we serve people that are in some way similar to us.
We teach people what we need to learn.
Exactly.
And if you do it from a healthy place, you're a few steps, you've already learned a few lessons. And so you're teaching the lessons that you've already learned, that maybe you've mastered 90%, because I don't feel like no one's perfect. But I'm like, hey, I'm just a few steps ahead of you, but you are the old version of me. I'm in recovery. I got you. I get you. I understand you.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So the reason why I wanted to talk to you, the main reason, and I love adventure. This is the interesting part. I started my business because I was lost as a woman, and motherhood brought me to consciousness. Motherhood brought me to self-awareness, because all of a sudden I had this human that I needed to take care of. And then, two others. And I was like, oh shit, having my oh shit moment. Like I'm not rock solid in myself. I'm scared because I don't know how to find it. And so the journey into my personal development was mainly I started for my children. My why was my kids. Now it's for me, but they're the ones who led me back to myself. But I attract a lot of women who are that caregiver for not only their children, but other people. They're in a leadership role, whether they realize it or not. And a lot of people emotionally depend on them because it's very easy to pick up other people's shit and to carry it for them for a really long time, not knowing, right? Creating codependency, whether it's emotional or energetic codependency.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you are a hypnotherapist. Is that what you can qualify and talk and say? Hypnotherapist.
Correct.
When I first heard this term, I assumed it's what you see in movies or in those magic shows,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like 1, 2, 3, snap your fingers. You're going to have me clucking like a chicken, right?
We can do that if you want.
No, that's scary. That's so vulnerable. Don't do that to me.
I'm just kidding. I don't know how to do that.
Okay. But that was my perception a few years ago coming into this. Not realizing it's one thing when you start to learn about meditation and mindfulness and the brain and consciousness, but there is also this big part of unconsciousness that is the driver of our actions. And I want to talk a lot about that because I see so many women putting this extreme pressure on themselves. Like, why can't I figure this out? I'm a highly intelligent woman. I've moved mountains. But now that feel defeated in trying to understand, why does my child trigger me so much? Or why can't I put myself first? Or why do I feel like I'm stuck and failing? And I would love for you to maybe just talk about that a little bit, of like what happens in the mind and maybe what you learned, what brought you to that point in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you just laid that up so well. I hope to come back to that. I think the easiest way for me to answer is like in my own like experience of transformation. I did have a one-off hypnotherapy session back in my early 20s. My coping mechanisms at the Air Force Academy in the United States were failing for the first time. And so I was depressed. I was crying I didn't know why. I couldn't have told you, for the first time in my life. I was starting to miss classes. It was really scary. I was like, I can't afford to miss classes. It's my senior year. And I was home for Christmas and my mom said, hey, Mandy, I don't know how or what help you need, but it was confusing to all of us. She said, but I bought my dad a hypnotherapy. She bought my father a hypnotherapy session to stop smoking for Christmas. She said, maybe we send you two. And I said, sure, whatever. I was super open-minded. And in that hour of working with a gentleman in imagery, meaning you close your eyes, you shut out the external data coming in through your five senses to the maximum extent. Your ears, you can't shut. Your audio channel is always on, even when you sleep. And so, you close your eyes and you sit in a comfortable chair. The temperature is good. And he's guiding you through a simple exercise of imagery. And imagery is so profound. One of the reasons I think it's so profound is it's just so versatile. You can do so much with imagery. And imagery is the language of our subconscious. So when something's happening in our mental experience or in our body experience, like anxiety, tears that we didn't call upon, we don't even know what's happening anymore. You can be sure that it's governed by the subconscious. And so the body's the only tool that the subconscious has besides imagery, like in dreams. We get feedback from our subconscious visually. The body's that feedback tool in waking state to what needs attention. And so whether it's super down feelings or nervousness, anxiety, like a spectrum of human emotions, it's the imagery, emotions, and hormones that are language of the subconscious, as far as I understand it. And there may be more.
Hormones can change based on your subconscious.
Yeah. And when I say subconscious, I think that word, it's also in the realm of, I think it sounds a little mystical, right? Like subconscious, unconscious, but anything that's not happening under direction of your conscious mind, your chooser, your neocortex, the frontal lobe, anything that you don't need the strategy isn't helping, like desire to get out of bed at 5 a.m. or desire to stay glued to the sheets at 5 a.m. That's desire. We're not choosing to want to stay in bed. It's just happening, right? The things that just happen, those are under control of the subconscious. They're based on our experiences, our associations, and our decisions up to that point about what it all means. Some of that happens before conscious. So we're getting super technical right now. Maybe I should back up a tiny bit.
I love this. So
okay.
some of it, just explain why. So yeah, just dive a little bit deeper and then we can
Okay.
back up. But I
Okay,
like
great.
we'll complete the technical.
The technical, to me, it's so important to demystifying the tools that are natural to all of us. So guess what? The problems that we're experiencing, they're already governed by these rules. These are the mechanisms that are creating our problems. It's not a problem if I want a PB&J and I make a chicken. I just make a PB&J instead. It's not a problem. There's not emotionalized energy moving us towards doing something different, right? But when we are battling ourselves, another word for that is called self-sabotage. Mm-hmm. Or it's when our desires aren't aligned with some other of our desires, like what our higher intellect wants for us, what our values tell us. Our physical comfort maybe wants something different. That's when we start to experience anxiety. Anxiety is just, in layman's terms, in my simplification of way of explaining, it's like a battle happening within us or between us and our external environment. So when something inside, like a value, doesn't match what we're experiencing or choosing in our environment, or when one of our beliefs doesn't match another one of our beliefs or desires, we're going to experience anxiety. And that's so beautiful. Like, great, thank you. Let's take the lid off of this a little bit. Let's let some of the pressure out of this, because that means your body's working. It means we're not asleep at the wheel. We have higher desires that are conflicting with our existing environment. I think that's good news. And later, that experience with that hypnotherapist when I was in my early 20s, I thereafter could experience emotion and recognize my emotions for the first time in my life. It put my life on a new trajectory. Fast forward 10 years through all the 20s, 10 years later, I'm seeing self-sabotage in a relationship that matters the most to me. I'm losing a relationship that mattered greatly to me. And I knew this was a pattern. So I was like, I'm seeking some help. I got online the very next day and I thought, instead of maybe a counselor, hypnotherapy really helped me that one time. Let me try that again. And through my own healing process, which is still ongoing, of course.
It's never done.
Right. But I can say that self-sabotage in a relationship is done. And when you're guided through a process, and every person's process is different because nobody has the problem the same way that you do.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be unique for you, but there is a bottom to it. And
so then when you came back to it and you started experiencing more hypnotherapy yourself, you fell in love and then got trained and educated, and now that's how you support people.
Yes.
Awesome. So I wanted to talk to you about strategy and action. And then, because I've had sessions with you, or a session, and we'll have many more sessions with you. And I've tried many different modalities. When I first started my personal development journey, you jump into, like, my first entry point into this realm, I would say maybe would be Reiki, right? Like energy healing. And I didn't have coaching in my life then. I mean, coaching is a completely different modality, depending on the coach. I understand that. And there's education and structure and accountability and, in my world, ass kicking, but like just what I find is, and it's an acceleration process. But when I was getting these modalities, you know, I would be like, oh, try this, try this, try this, right? People are like, oh, you feel like talk therapy is not working. Try this, try this. It takes a village. Like, let's just be honest. You cannot, there's no one and done. There's no quick fixes. We're not broken. What I'm hearing you say is, you know, we've labeled the feeling, the physical feeling, as anxiety, but it might manifest as something else. That, I always say, behavior is a language. So your behavior, your body is telling you something like, knock, knock, knock. Please pay attention to me. I'm trying to give you some signs that something is out of alignment. So then you act and you're trying to listen, but I find people push it down, right? Like, do not feel that, mask it, numb it, like push it away. Our first entry is typically, you know, a physician. Oh, well, you have this. Here's a prescription for that. And then we don't look at it, right? So I'm a huge fan of a board of advisors and taking all different approaches. Listen to the MD, listen to this, listen to that, and say, what is the common denominator here? But truly being connected to ourselves. You know, part of my story is I was so deeply disconnected to myself that one day I woke up and they're like, you have cancer. And I'm like, really? Where did this come from? Well, maybe like the fact that your abdomen is bulging to the point where people are starting to think you're pregnant. And I'm like, oh, because I would never look at myself in the mirror. I never considered that because I was just go, go, go like a robot. So disconnected from the emotion, let alone doing anything for myself. So going back a little bit, because I'm like getting off track here, let's talk about what is your relationship with like ease and joy? I feel like people were so ingrained that if you're not suffering or in pain, there's no growth there. So things need to be hard. What's your perspective on that?
Oh God. I mean, I was one of those people. And I mean, this makes me want to cry because yeah, I mean, at one point I was working about 14 hours a day, literally 14, no lunch, at the desk, 5 a.m. to about 7 p.m., going to master's classes in the evenings twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week for 2 to 3 hours in the evenings. And I was training for marathon. And once you up the ante, it's really hard. It's like a fix of, am I working hard enough? Am I working hard enough? And, you know, then you're a taskmaster on yourself because you're comparing yourself to your yesterday. Right. Well, it's not as bad as it was yesterday. That's a dangerous game, as you found out too. It sounds like, right? Because all of a sudden we're like, who's taking care of this person? Who's watching out for her? And, it does show up. I really resonated with what you said. It shows up differently for every person. That's one of the reasons why I just want everyone to have access to this information. Ease and joy. Ease is like it's my clincher word. Like when I think about, because I am a rock climber, you know, I have done extremely difficult, demanding, taxing things in my life. The fact that one of the most profound tools I've ever encountered is access through relaxation blew my mind. Like, what? The most powerful transformations you can find is through this modality of ease. Self-care, relaxation is the entry point to that information. And guess what?
Terrified of it.
Yeah, and it's because hypnosis I'll share a little bit of information later about the brain states, but it's relaxation of criticality. It's dropping into imagery, into imagination. It's so natural to us. Before the age of 7, we don't have another capability in waking state. That's all we are, is just a walking subconscious, open to suggestion, open to life's possibilities. So I don't know, I guess really focusing on your question, it's the people who are really enjoying success in life. Mm-hmm. They already know. They already learned the lesson that it's harder's not better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think we see a lot of behind that. We see the success and we don't see the ease that's going on behind. It's like the little duck, you know, it's like it looks easy up top and we're assuming they're doing it under the water, like working really hard. The birds that fly those long distances, they're gliding and they're in formation.
So that's a really important point too, is I think sometimes it's very easy to glorify the grind, right? Because people say, you don't understand what happens behind the scenes. And yeah, there is a sense of, I'm not working 14-hour days. That's for sure. I might have one 14-hour day every now and again, but I'm choosing to do that. And I'm lit up and I'm energized. And to be honest, sometimes, yeah, you will have those moments. But if that's your waking existence every single day, that's not joy. That's not ease. That's not sustainability. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about sustainability for a second. I was going back to like, what the heck question was I intentionally trying to ask you? And it was about strategy plus doing some of this work, because you need to have a goal. You need to have a plan. You need to have an intention, right? Daily actions. But I find implementing this work like hypnotherapy or what I call energy work, like something where I know I can do some access myself, but you do need someone outside of you to be able to facilitate, to support you to dive deeper. I feel like, you can self-heal, but you do, like, getting someone outside of you is truly beneficial to get to the next level, unless I'm just not consciously aware of how to do that yet. But what is your perspective on like the strategy and the energy work at the same time to reach the quote unquote success that you desire, or alignment, as I like to call it?
Yes, alignment. Such a good way of representing the effect of
and can you hold your mic like this, and then it won't rub on your
shirt? Absolutely. Yes, I think I tell folks about this, I explain this difference. I try to, because I've been thinking a lot about this recently myself, is how to make it very clear what to expect based off what you do. And I just want to interject one thing before I forget it. That conversation about ease versus, struggle, I have so much empathy for that. So I think it's easy to say after you've come through the battle, like, don't do that way, right? I know how hard that is. And you know how hard that's a waking of awareness. So I just want anybody who does hear this to know that it's with a great deal of respect, that it's like with encouragement that I share that truth for me, that maybe that will open up possibility for others to reconsider if that is your experience. Maybe it doesn't have to be, and feel supported and loved, so that you can reach out for resources that can help you experience that differently, and don't try to do it by yourself. But again, even reaching out for help for me, it took me an extremely long time. So the whole conversation of the way I hear your question is kind of like, do it yourself or do it with help, right? It's like, do I try to do this myself? Yes, I have the strategy. Yes, I know that subconscious information is driving my experience. Can't I do some of that myself without like bringing somebody on board or hiring somebody? I teach people every single day how to change subconscious information on their own. But one, you got to know how. So instruct yourself, get an expert to instruct you, or, yeah, I mean, that's a good, for starters, learn how to change your subconscious experience methodically, reliably, consistently, predictably, so that you can do it yourself if you choose, and recognize that when we're battling ourselves, we're not really in a great place. My truth, we're not in a great place to be the referee here. Right? So sometimes we need someone to step in, create that transformation with us so we can get over the hump and then once again self-govern. So then we can be that judicious person calling the shots between strategy and, emotional experience or intuition. Does that make sense?
And can you explain that a little bit more of like, once you know how to do that to yourself? So is it like once you've gone through an experience, whether it's a tool with you or someone else, you're like, okay, I'm just going to recreate what Mandy did with me. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
It's a little bit different. Like what we experienced, that was transformation work. It's really hard to do transformation work it's virtually impossible to do it on yourself. We're always
what do you say to that person that's having daily anxiety or daily resistance in their body and their being, and they're constantly battling themselves and they don't know how to turn it around? What suggestions would you give them?
One, the very first thing is thank that. So sometimes the folks they're like convinced this is something going on that's like epidemic to me, right? And maybe strong fear, it won't ever go away. Some of those willful, smart, intelligent, strong, and capable people, I say, cool. First week, don't change a thing. Just try not to improve it. Sit with it for a bit because it's not going to kill us. I mean, panic attacks different, right? But I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. We're talking about down feelings that we're like, it's a scope of, there is a scope of that. I want to caveat. There is a scope of practice concern, right? We need to call in the medical support.
Right.
And we need to make sure we're supported, like you said, by that village. So we need to make sure that all the care providers are present. But when somebody's in my office and we're meeting for the first time and that experience is super painful, and even can be like the chatter's just going on constantly, try not to change it first. Thank it for giving you that information and let it know we're going to take care of this, because they're in the support of someone who has the tools to know how to do that with them. The relief is going to start happening immediately through a process like this. Resolution is another matter. Because then you got to move through that process to full resolution. And again, we were talking about such a spectrum of issues, but whatever that looks like for an individual is a really beautiful, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I haven't come across an issue yet that can't be resolved.
Interesting.
Hope.
Can you talk about what happens during the process? Like, let's talk about, I'm walking the line here on like many things that I've tried. And I'm like, do you need to be in therapy for 2 years to resolve a problem?
Right. I love the way that, I was going to say,
I'm walking the line. Do you need to be in therapy for 2 years to solve the same problem?
I think so let me tell you this, whatever you believe you need to do to heal, that is what's going to happen. That is what's going to take.
So if you're like, I'm never going to heal, it's going to take forever, it will take forever.
Yes, it will. Or you'll bump into healing accidentally. Do you know what I mean? But it's not a consistent plan. Your consistent plan is what your belief system is. Your consistent experience will be what your subconscious programming is. And, that's why I do think that just people having information, what I've accidentally drifted into just in the last few minutes is potentially giving the impression that this can be done yourself as well. There's no alternative for for instance, we did the other day on the phone. I can't do that for myself. Mm-hmm. We need someone else. But once an issue that's rearing its head, that's rising up and calling for help, once it's resolved and it's done, then the daily stuff, you're in such a better place to manage yourself.
Right.
And then people feel that capability midway through. They can see that happening before we even reach the end of that issue. That's the general experience. It's very empowering.
So this is my personal experience with progression of different levels of success. And I don't mean business success. I mean success in anything, like being able to get out of bed in the morning or eating every day. Like that was a thing I had to work on, like physically creating the space to just eat, right? Or the habits of eating. Being consistent with certain habits, getting, it's one thing to take the daily actions, but what I have found when I've done anything like tapping or hypnotherapy or energy work, sometimes I'm like, I feel different and I don't know why. Was it from eating consistently or was it from all of these other things? And I just have to have faith and just keep moving forward of like, whatever's working, I'm going to keep doing. But I find you get to levels of quote unquote success, and then you reach this like glass ceiling, right? The upper limit problems, where this is like a term, I think it's in The Big Leap or something. It's in the book, Big Leap. And you're like here and you're like, why is everything hard again? Can you explain that?
I think that sounds like a growth process. That just sounds like growth to me, right? It's like, It's like those growth spurts. God, there was something else that came to my mind.
We could literally talk forever about this process, but tell me the biggest impact that you see you have on your clients, what you've been able to help them achieve.
What I take a lot of pride in what I do. It's just joy, really. It is. There's so much joy. I think people laugh at me sometimes because I get so psyched for their outcomes. I get more psyched when they can see it coming too, because I get the honor of seeing them healed sometimes before they know that they can be. And that's just that's just one of the gifts that I came to this world with. Mm-hmm. And I feel I've always had that vision, and that's what makes me really suited for this work. But the moment of reward is when the client sees it too. And then it's like this, holy shit, right? Like this was always there in me. And that happens very rapidly. So there's definitely been transformative outcomes, people with severe anxiousness and, relationships that they didn't know if there was a way to resolve that relationship and remain in it and deal with the feelings of disconnection they were also having. And once we rise in perspective, it's like climbing a hill and getting higher ground. And then you see, every time we rise in perspective or awareness, which is the exact result of this work, mm-hmm. You can't unsee it, for starters. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. So you're forever changed for the better. And sometimes we rise to that next level of awareness and we look and we go, there wasn't a conflict to begin with. It's the fear that keeps us from seeing. We don't want it.
I just want to point that out. There wasn't a conflict to begin with. Interesting.
It can be. And, it's like people uncover this. And then in some ways in their process, they see before I do. Because the experience is always internal, as you observed and you experienced as well. You let me know what that outcome was, what that shift was, what that change was. So this is so much servant to client values, which makes me feel really, really good about it. So I really do serve client values, not the other way around. Like I'm the prescriptor.
Right.
Here, you need a little more of this. This is missing. That's not the way it works.
No, it's what do you need? What feels good to you? What works? Trust yourself. Trust your
Trust
gut,
yourself.
right? Trust your gut. And I find,
Literally.
yeah, trust your guts. And I find a lot of us lose that along the way, lose the inability to trust their intuition and themselves, and ask for permission and validation, and seek, push, go, like, look at me, how many gold stars can I get, or look how exhausted am I not, a good mother? That's a big one for me. That's a big trigger point.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, I'm almost dying over here. Do I get like a gold medal for this?
Right.
Yeah. Because if we're not exhausted, we must not be doing a good job.
What a bind, right?
Yeah.
That's called like a pain lock.
Yeah. If we're not, and I think that's what we're here to do. It's this paradigm shift that you can be everything you want to be to other people and yourself. You can achieve. One, you have to, oh my God, it's like, one, you have to believe. I don't know who said this, but
I agree with you.
Seems like a very metaphoric like saying of, you can achieve, but you have to believe. There is this fear and vulnerability of what I think are people who are coming into this as trailblazers. Not everyone is practicing this. Everyone kind of consciously knows now you need to eat green vegetables and drink water. But when you say to someone, hey, that you can make that easier, you don't need to suffer or struggle like every single day. You don't need to be poor. You don't need to be in a lack mindset. You can change. Your consciousness can change. I don't think everyone believes that yet. And there is this small population who's like, I'm going to be the change I want to see in my family, in the world, in whatever. And I'm going to take a stand for that. And I think that's the difference you're making.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So how can, like I said, we could talk forever and ever and ever. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, or the tip of the mountain, as we should say, the tip of the boulder. How do you best support people now? What types of people are you working with? And where can they contact you if they want more information?
Yeah, absolutely. So the three thoughts came to mind. I just wanted to thank you for creating this space for me. This has been so enjoyable and pleasant, and fun. And so the kind of people that I support, they can be men or women. I support people especially in three areas: anxiety, probably leapt out at you during this conversation, relationship to self, and relationship to others. And so let's make that tangible. You probably heard the relationship to others as well. When we're talking about, we're hearing these worth, enoughness, value. When we're not acting like we matter, it's because you can just see evidence in your life. It's because some part of you doesn't believe that you do have that level of worth that's worthy enough to receive self-care, whatever. And so, those things can just be obliterated from our being, from our consciousness, through work in subconscious. You know that because if you could decide for it to be different and then it was different and your experience changed, you'd know it was a conscious issue. So repetition, I just want to give this gift too. Repetition can be extremely powerful. Repetition, there's no way around it unless you work in transformation. Still, it's a process, but it's a much quicker one. So you can bypass some of the need to just repeat forever. You know what I mean? But transformation can happen all different kinds of ways. These tools are inherent in each of us. And so those are the issues that I work. And does that complete enough?
Yeah, for sure. And where can they contact you? Like just via email? Mm-hmm. Where can they find more information?
I am in a website transition right now, but I am at email at Mandy at palladiummind.com. Palladium is one of the elements on the periodic table. So you can remember it that way. Palladium Mind. It's in the platinum group. PALLADIUM mind.com. Mandy with a Y at palladiummind.com.
Perfect. And I will put that in the show notes.
Cool.
Or above this video if you're watching this online somewhere. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, there's more information, but I'm sure if they email you, follow you, they will learn more because you'll be educating them about this and how they can transform their life. But it's been, I'm calling this energy work. You can call it woo-woo. People think it's woo-woo, but I'm like, hey, I'm not suffering. I'm not struggling. And I know when I'm out of alignment, something needs to happen. And if I can't facilitate that change or alignment myself, then I bring on an expert to help me because, I got one life to live and it goes quickly. And I think time is ticking. And if we want to make magic happen, well, I'm like a driven person too. So I'm like, hey, this boulder, this bump, it's been here for 2 days. Let's get shit moving, get shit done and get shit moving. So thank you for 1, helping me make that happen in my own life. And 2, for sharing your wisdom with my peeps.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Heather. Rockstar. Bye-bye.